Morning, everyone. My name is Shegun Akiode, and it's a very great day to have this session. So it's the question and answer session with Shegun Akiode, and I've decided to restrict it to compensation and benefits, and that's for obvious reason. If I
So
make
this is
it
what I
open
would
a
do
lot,
before I go to
Ayatunde, let me try to start with some of the questions that have been asked in the Google form. I'll try to curate them into different buckets. And the very first one, which is very critical, is a question on cost of living. So, because of the current situation in Nigeria at the moment, a lot of people are asking questions around cost of living. And these are some of the questions that have been asked. I will try to answer all of them together. One, as of the reality of today in Nigeria, what would be your ideal? I just copied and pasted the way it was dropped in the Google form. So pardon if there are typographical errors that I was not able to pick. As of the reality of today in Nigeria, what would be your ideal percentage recommended for cola for a medium-sized company? The same question, very similar. How do you convince an organization to implement cola for its team? Then, with the new global reality, in what ways should compensation and benefits be implemented to retain talent in the organization? So, I'm going to be answering this all questions together because they are related to cost of living adjustment. Cost of living at the moment, and it's not only a Nigerian problem, it's global. As a matter of fact, most economies of the world are going through their own fair share of cost of living. Let me bring it home to Nigeria. You would realize that because of the removal of the fuel subsidy, the source of, let me say, salaries of employees is really not enough anymore. The roads are getting freer in the city of Lagos. As a matter of fact, most people are parking their cars very relative. Before now, if I wanted to go to work, I need to set out like 2 hours before when I'm supposed to resume. But in recent time, I've been making record time getting to the office in 35 minutes, 40 minutes. What would have normally take me for 2 hours when the road was fully in place? So, what is the ideal percentage? I will not recommend any ideal percentage. And this is the reason. Now, knowing fully well that inability to craft cost of living adjustment, most organizations have different ways of coping with it. Number one, if you are an organization that deal in forex, what do I mean? Maybe most of your source of production or whatever you're doing as a dovetail into forex, which means you're doing a lot of importation. You will realize that if you add $1 million commitment last year, that'll be 400,000. That'll be 400 million. This year, as it stands today, the forex market is now floating. You would be remitting that same $1 million at 800 million naira. That is already a strain on the organization. So if I sit here and I say you should implement 20% increase in salaries of employees, then that's a recipe for disaster. So depending on the financial strength of the organization, you would be able to know what the organization can do. Yes, cola might be pitched against the cost of living, the inflationary rate in the country. Currently, as at last month, for the month of June, that is sitting on 22.4%. No organization can be able to implement that across board. It's not possible. Imagine you are moving your wage bill by 22%. If you are not careful, then the organization will no longer exist. But if an organization chooses to do a fixed amount, that will be an approach to cover. Because if you do a percentage increase in the entire salaries of employees, knowing fully well that that might impact your basic pay, it might impact your transport, it might impact your housing, and by extension, it increases your pension contribution and increases every other thing. If you are in a unionized environment, that's also a recipe for problem later because the unions are always negotiating on the basic salary. So if you do a percentage increase in salaries across board, what that means is that when the union come later, because for my own industry, in the food industry, our union negotiation is every year, every 2 years. So we are in the negotiation year now. The last time we implemented the negotiation, we had a 14% increase. That was the last 2 years. So what we did was to break out that 14% into two tranches. We did a 10% in the first year and a 4% in the second year. That was the last negotiation. Because of the current rate of cost of living, subsidy removals, everything is skyrocketing. We are already suspecting that the union may be pushing for 2 digits or getting to more than 14% that they did in the last 2 years. So for my organization or any organization that happen to be in that collective bargaining union negotiated environment, we will not be taking an increase now. We would wait for the unions to do something or to make a proposal, then we'll do it together. So we may be able to create a cushion effect that will take effect now. Then later on, we might be able to introduce something a bit more sustainable. So I will not be recommending a percentage increase because the capability of each organization differs, and by extension, the ability to implement, ability to pay and sustain that pay will differ. How do you convince an organization to implement COLA? It's going to be a lot of, if it's a medium-sized organization, if it's a small organization, it might be tough. Tough in the sense that they're also trying to keep afloat. As a matter of fact, if this trend continues the way it is and cost of living are skyrocketing, cost of doing business is also skyrocketing. We may be getting to a point where some organization may be forced to start to lay off employees. So if I'm a business owner that is trying to keep afloat, and you're telling me to come and implement COLA, I say, okay, I'm also trying to keep afloat. So what are you trying to say to me exactly? Now that takes me to the last question on this particular subject due to the summary I've done. In the current global realities, how do you attract employees? I think what would happen would differ. Yesterday, I was in a session with some HR professionals, and somebody mentioned that someone got an offer. And the reason why the individual is considering the offer is that the organization is giving an option for Uber to walk back and coming, going to the office and leaving the office. And the person decided to say, oh, fine, that means my transportation is taken care of. So what that means is that if I'm going to get to the office, the organization is paying for me to go to the office. So transport is the most impacted immediately. Food is also skyrocketing, no doubt. But my transport fare can be taken care of. What does that mean? It means then I can spend my money on food, technically. Now, organizations are looking at hybrid work environment because in this current global reality, you need to look at things that will make people come to the office. So the demographics of the organization also matter. The demographic of the individual trying to get into the workplace is also critical because if I was a Gen X or a Gen Z or a millennial, what will make me come to the office or attract me to work will be different. So if you really want to attract people in this current economy or in this current global reality, then you need to start to think about what makes people tick. So if you can pilot work from home, remote hybrid with accountability, do it. If you can do staff bosses for your employees, do it. What that helps you to do in the interim might be a very heavy investment, but in the long term, it might pay off because people will now start to go in that line because it means that transport fare is taken care of by the organization.